And as a leader, that translated to get to know your colleagues. Yeah, not all the ins and outs of everything, but some key things about them. Know about how they do a relationship. Is their relationship okay?
Hello and welcome. Today we are joined by Andrew Cowley. He is a wellbeing consultant, speaker and author, a coach for designated mental health leads and the school mental health ward. Today, our focus question is, what does it take to put wellbeing at the heart of education? Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Becky. I'm delighted to be here today.
Fabulous. We're so pleased to have you here. So let's kick off. Would you be happy to share how your experience within teaching kind of led you to the work that you do today, and tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course, Becky. Yes, of course. In your introduction, you didn't mention that I've been a teacher, but I had been a teacher for 30 years in the primary sector in South London. 8 of those as deputy head. I suppose, obviously I'm known for my writing now, that actually much of what I had in place in terms of looking after what we now call well-being of colleagues is something I realised probably as a student. I'm realising that the way that management of staff illness wasn't particularly strong, but one colleague who'd come in, and it was the old adage of teacher guilt, and she was literally dropping, and the deputy head's office was opposite her classroom. The head was at the front of the building, and they had no idea what she was. So we did. I went to the deputy and said, she can't cope. She just needs to be sent home. What are we going to do with her class? I said, we'll double up. I'm in the next door class. Send them all through to me. We'll squash it. We'll do some whole class storytelling, whole class story writing, etc. And we ran for the afternoon, and we're absolutely fine. Probably more children should have been in the class that there should have been, plus myself and the TA. But we had a great afternoon. My colleague went home, had a couple of days off sick, and had to be managed separately. It's that realization that the staff needed looking after, and they needed to be known what's going on. Look at the conversations that people are having with each other. Actually recognise when somebody is struggling. I mean, in their case, it was just a really bad cold, not quite flu. Those could be knocked them sideways. There's plenty of other occasions when we got staff who are really struggling with their mental health, particular aspects of well-being. And it's that experience. I still refer back to that now in many of my thoughts that I suppose generated much of what I did as school leader about well-being.
So what led you to move out of full-time teaching and to do the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, long story. But I tell you short, whilst I was still teaching, I was blogging for Healthy Toolkits group we set up back in 2016 now, and I wrote the blogs for the group, and they were quite regular. At one point, they were once or sometimes twice a week on a whole range of topics. We sometimes talk about teachers being healthy, where the obviously that particular part of the name came from. But we realised actually it was about principles and about values and avoiding those tick box tokeny things. And my blog was, I didn't realise at the time, being read by an editor at Bloomsbury. I reviewed a book for them and said, would you like 100 ideas on wellbeing? It's one of the 100 ideas series. And the editor came back to me and said, actually, we think you could write a book about leading wellbeing. And that's where that was the genesis of the Wellbeing Toolkit. So I wrote that when I was still teaching in May 2019. And of course, the early parts of next year was when we were struck down with COVID. And I was basically in school the bulk of the time during COVID. And I realised I was physically burnt out by the experience of that. So I made that decision at that point to move out of the profession. I took retirement from the classroom and from schools. And I was midway through writing my second book at the time. But that just enabled me to have the opportunity. I was offered that by Carnegie to coach first on the mental health award and then when the designated mental health lead training came up, I became a coach on that as well. And they say that's the direction I've moved in that point since. And very rewarding it's been too. Yeah, one of the key things for me, I remember this back from my teacher training back in 1992, which probably predates the birth of many of the people listening to this, was get to know your class. And absolutely, that's stuck with me. And as a leader, that translated to get to know your colleagues. And not all the ins and outs of everything, but some key things about them. Know about, is their relationship okay? Because I've worked with any number of people whose relations fallen apart because of the teaching. No one support them. Also, get to know things about them. Can you have a conversation with somebody that isn't about school? What are they doing? And I don't mean, stalking somebody on Facebook to see their holiday pictures, but actually having something you can talk to them about. If you know somebody enjoys triathlons or climbing mountains or just likes a good meal, it's Friday night is curry night. Oh, what did you have? What did you have last Friday? Have you tried anything different? A valid restaurant, give me a recommendation. A conversation you can have with a colleague gives you a different sense of connection. And connection is ever so strong, because that's one thing I talk about a lot, is the importance of relationships within a workplace. It's not just in education, and it's elsewhere, but particularly in education, where I suppose we are more under a spotlight. The importance of those sound relationships helps bring a staff together at times where there is more stress.
Absolutely.
So COVID is a great example. Inspection is another. There's some other kind of crisis. And one thing that happened in my first or second year as deputy was one of our colleagues died very suddenly. And how we managed that. And we managed it through principles, and we managed it through decency and professionalism. For example, when I did I'd say the head in the morning was flood to tears. Obviously, she'd just taken the news from a colleague's husband. We just went into not emergency or flight mode, but just, right, what do we need to do for everyone? So what I did, I said, right, we've got to tell the staff straight away. We don't want them finding out through rumour, through gossip, through Facebook. So I said, right, get the kids registered. I will take an assembly and you speak to the staff and do it as long as it takes. And I took an hour and a half assembly.
Wow, off the top of your head.
Children, bless them, they obviously knew something was happening because they went there, and I covered through a bank of stories. It was about things you do. I took a load of picture books in with me, and I put the projector. We should have shared some, and bless them, 250 children and me. And they were absolutely brilliant, which is something that I'd always hold up with that school. People were very critical of behaviour in our school. Have a deputy there look up 250 children, have them in complete silence for an hour and a half without threatening them because you're doing something wrong. And it's about relationships, because they knew that something about me, they knew I influenced them. I always in assembly, I didn't sit on a chair. I always walked around, made eye contact. Someone was being sick, look, would be enough to read that. So that was fine. So that really showed the strength of relationship, and that enabled us firstly to manage the passing of our colleague. Obviously, staff were clearly upset, so obviously there was tears and questions that were being asked. And then we followed up how we managed that with our children. So the parents were informed by email of what happened, and they said, we will be telling the children of the classes involved, because you have two classes. We will tell them what happened. These are the words we will use. And but if you want to tell your child what's happened yourself beforehand, that is absolutely fine. But obviously, they're not to anyone else. And again, that was managed really well. So that was the next day, and we offered counselling to the children if they wanted. Our counsellor offered their time free. So that situation came about not through panic, but by being proactive and responsive and principled.
But also putting staff first. Because you could easily have just got those children in a room and told them first and not kind of
we
considered that.
So we merged it, and we got a great deal of praise and respect from parents, staff, and people who heard from outside the school about how we'd managed that situation so successfully. And it's one of our proudest things that we'd done as a staff.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, so before you came on, me and Becky were talking and was talking about like your role, and I was telling Becky that like as a student, I know when the teachers are not doing well. I can tell when my teachers are burnt out and when my teachers are not well supported, because unfortunately we get the like reaction, because they get more angrier, they're very quick to punish us, they're not their normal self, and we can really easily pick up on it. And stuff. So that's why I think the work you are doing is so important.
Yeah.
Not just for the staff, but also now for the students, because the reaction would be that we are going to get better teaching quality, because the teachers are going to be in a better space when their well-being is put at the forefront, because you can't expect them to pour from an empty cup.
Yeah. But exactly like that. That's and children pick up on things like that. Sometimes it can be said, children can take advantage of somebody not being quite so well, which perhaps secondary colleagues might say that. But I think my experience in primary was that if something wasn't right, children pick up on that, and they would often go and speak to their parents about it. And then the parent would either come to the teacher and say, okay, our son also said that something wasn't quite right, or they might say it to the head. And that's, it's a trusting. Again, it comes back to relationships and knowing something's not, allowing that degree of support to come in there. But I think it's not just by osmosis, but the message of staff being looked after comes through that your children are being looked after. And that's something I think is absolutely essential to us when you're looking after your children. You're not hammering home. It's all about rules. It's all about behaviour. It's all about banning phones, or we're going to put you in isolation. Those are completely negative things, and not very proactive. They're very reactive. And being reactive is not a responsible solution, because it's what you're doing there and then. If you're proactive and principled, and the word I like to use is responsive, is you anticipate what sort of things might happen, and you've got the language, you've got principles to respond to that when it happens.
Absolutely. And this brings on to my question, which is, could you talk us through the THINK acronym and why you feel it's helpful around wellbeing in education? It'd be great if you could break the acronym down as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we like to view acronyms in education. SAT, CHCP, and acronyms are good. If we just think acronym in the school wellbeing toolkit, school mental health toolkit, but it actually came about for presentation I did at a conference for Leeds Carnegie. It came about actually in conversation with my granddaughter, who was 18 months old at the time. I was just thinking out aloud, and I could hear her nodding away to it. But the THINK acronym is a way of remembering some of the key things. THINK stands for time, holistic, inclusive, non-judgmental, and knowledgeable. And I urge people to do this for well-being, mental health particularly. But I suppose it can be applicable to many other aspects of school. So T is time. Time is our most valuable resource as teachers, as we know. So it should never be wasted and never abused, and always protect it. But in terms of mental health and well-being, two sides of it. First of all, being timely in sort of interventions you need to make, whether it's with a colleague or a young person, but also taking your time over something. So let's think about putting mental health in the curriculum, for example. It's not something you can cover in one staff meeting. It's probably something you need to take a complete year to do. Otherwise, you're just shoehorning things in to make it look tokenistic. I don't use social media as much as I used to, but one thing I always say when it's things like during Mental Health Week or World Mental Health Day, say, right, you had your day, you had your week, what happens next? It's if you've done it for the week and nothing else happens afterwards, you're not taking your time. Things take time to embed. Change takes time to embed. So that's what the T is there. The H is holistic, and this is whole school thinking. It's recognizing that mental health and well-being is part of everything that goes on in school. You need to link everything together. Things that sit in their own boxes, that have assessment in one box, learning in another box, attendance, behaviour, safeguarding. Everything is linked because we're about creating the whole child. We're about creating the young people who are going to be our future leaders, and they need to recognise that everything they do comes together. It's a way of building up their independence as learners, but their independence as young people and responsible young people as well, as responsibility for each other, but also for themselves. So if we're being holistic, whole school approach, recognising that health and wellbeing fits in very clearly with attendance and behaviour. We talk about behaviour, and talking about bad behaviour, we're talking about good behaviour as well. Good behaviour is also a communication. What's it communicating? Is it communicating, yes, we're agreeing to how to conduct ourselves, or is it communicating, we have to do this because we're being compelled to do it? Which comes back to a sense of why. So that's holistic. I is inclusive. Now, inclusivity, we all know about that in schools, but particularly around mental health and wellbeing, the inclusive side makes sure we include everybody. There's an off-quoted statistic. When the training was first mooted for mental health leads in school, it was 1 in 9 children have a potential mental health condition. After COVID, that was 1 in 6. Shortly afterwards, that's now reckoned to be 1 in 5. So 20% of children in non-cast have or will have a diagnosed mental health condition. Now, it doesn't mean that the other 80% on the latest statistics will never have a time when they do not have an issue around their mental health. It's not as mental health, just the same as we have physical health. There'll be times when people feel down, upset, anxious. Very careful about the way we use the word anxious, not anxiety, medical diagnosed anxiety, but anxious and worried about things. Something's going on at home, something's going on in the classroom. So an inclusive school will acknowledge that the universal offer of what they're doing with mental health, so to see how it's fitting in the curriculum, so how it's covered through playground behaviours, lunchtime behaviours, assemblies, is inclusive of everyone and acknowledges that everyone has mental health, and other times when it's going to feel under amounts of stress or pressure. So that's what inclusive means. Now, the N, non-judgmental, really thinking about stigma around mental health. And we will all have heard various phrases used, inappropriate, about mental health. And some of them we were thrown around at the time. Remember some things that were said on the playground when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, the things we shouldn't use, not understanding what they meant. It was just things they probably picked up from home, television, or whatever. But there are sometimes phrases that are used now. Snowflake is one. It's quite the term that I don't particularly like that. I've heard that used by Piers Morgan on television. It's an offensive term. The implication is you've got no resilience. Actually, no, it's not about not having resilience. It's about having respect. And phrases like that, and things I had to challenge professionally, like keep taking the tablets. I had to take somebody aside because they said that to somebody who actually did have a diagnosed mental health condition. I said that's really not appropriate in the staff room in front of everyone else. It's actually to bullying. It's a stigmatic, it's a stigma. It's a stigma what you're using there. So non-judgmentalism is avoiding stigma, but stigma can also come around from fear. It's not just prejudice. It can be fear of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing in case you trigger something. It can also come from an awareness of not having the skills and experience, which again is very important. It clearly says in Keeping Children Safe in Education that we are not, as educators, to diagnose a child with a particular condition. And we often hear that in staff rooms. Oh, they're autistic. Oh, they've got ADHD. How do you know? I'm not the expert. And so, they've got mental health problems. How do you know? You might have concerns. That's what we're there to do. We're able to identify that we've got concerns, and we're able to know which people. So it's the same case sometimes. The family support worker who can direct the child or their family to the appropriate level of support. So that's what non-judgmental is. And finally, the K, knowledgeable, that comes back to what I was saying before, knowing your children, knowing your staff. Absolutely know them, know what makes them tick. And one thing I like to promote what they call a culture of noticing in a school. It's very easy, the primary school thing you can do. Everyone can do this. It's absolutely free. Is have somebody on the gate in the mornings. Usually it's a head, sometimes a deputy, sometimes it's family support, pastoral team. And it's not just a bit of PR. So it's good PR to be on there meeting the parents. Also, what do you notice? Those children come in. That child who always usually smiles, come bouncing through the gate in the mornings. They're not their usual self. What are you going to do about it? Is it make a note of that? Do I need to have a word with that child later on? Do I need to tell the teacher to keep an eye on them? Do I need to speak to the parent? Are they everything okay? And again, if you're doing it really well, parents will speak to you. Some parents will just tell you everything that's going on in their lives because it's quite important, because you're the only other point out of their family they speak to. But sometimes there's key things there. They had a bad night. We had a row at home. We had a row between the children at home. The older brother, sister has done something. We've had a loss in the family. The old classic, the house died last night. But those things are important to children. And we know it's about life experience. And they will eventually know it's about life experience, but it's how you handle things. So that's the knowledgeable side. Think. We like them. But the other reason I chose think was we need to think more deeply about the experience of our colleagues and of our children, and not just go by the tick box approach. Tick boxes. I was never a tick box leader. I wasn't one to go on around the clipboard and ticking things off, because that doesn't mean you're not being effective.
I think that's really interesting, because it kind of takes me on to our next question, because I think one of the challenges we have around wellbeing, particularly for staff, is the lack of time to think and have that reflective practice. We don't, if you think about the NHS, reflective practice is absolutely, it's a given, you have to have it.
Yeah.
But we just don't have that in education. And I think I was going to ask if we could explore some of the challenges that there are for wellbeing and education for staff. But I think that's probably the first one. How do we ensure that staff have that opportunity to reflect on their practice? Because it is a practice, isn't it? It's not just about having your knowledge and imparting it on children. Whole load of other things involved.
There are. There's a number of things we do. The one thing, very honest things, having the ability for the schools to have supervision, which can come from coaching, which enables a level of reflective practice. Again, good coaching, good supervision doesn't tell you the answers. It gets you to think about your goodness level of questions that you might ask. It could be something like, how was somebody you admire handle this kind of situation?
It's interesting.
For example, that's one kind of thing.
And I think, I think often people have this perception that coaching is only for leaders, i.e., heads and deputy heads, but actually we're all leaders, aren't we, in teaching? We're leading our classroom.
Yes.
And so coaching and reflective practice is for everyone, teaching assistants, teachers. There's so many opportunities there.
It is, yeah. Because again, another model I promote for wellbeing is everyone is a wellbeing leader. Don't do it top down. This is what we're doing for your wellbeing. Don't do it bottom up, because it looks like we're complaining about this. What are we going to do about it? If it's sideways in, everyone's taking responsibility.
And I think that's something we've discussed recently, haven't we? When we've seen discussions in particular forums where SLT feel like they're doing their job, teachers feel like they're doing their job, and neither of them really kind of connect in terms of well-being, because there's so many differing kind of challenges.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see. Recently I've watched a lot of forums. The Twinkle group and the other ones on Facebook. You don't see it on LinkedIn quite so much, but you see it on what was Twitter, now X. It was all the SLT bashing, which it's an under disconnection there. And what needs to come across is that actually wellbeing is for everyone. There aren't particular needs. We only need to look at the Teacher Wellbeing Index from the Education Support Partnership, or Education Support as is now. It's that tells us quite a few things about the stresses that everyone is under. There's a particular question about leaders, particular questions about teachers, and recent years have included support staff in there as well. And there needs to be an appreciation that everyone is feeling pressure in different ways. That's why there really needs to be a really strong team ethos in a school. On the simplest end, that a school can do is if they instead of putting in what looks like a hierarchy, head, deputy, assistant heads of year, etc. Whatever model it is is actually creating a circle or putting in alphabetical order, because then it shows everyone is valued. I have seen it in schools. So they put it up at school and there's a head teacher somewhere 3 rows on the bottom, for example, in the middle. So they're not the leader at the top, not in the centre, everything rating off. We wanted some kind of strange family tree, but a member of the team. And I think it's one strong thing that will help people get that message across.
And I've heard some quite brilliant work by Kulvarn Atwal, who's a head teacher in London who oversees 2 schools, and he runs slice groups, which I think is really interesting, where he brings everyone together. So that's students, children in primary school and staff, admin staff, teaching staff, and they are creating the approach. So it's not the heads and the deputies sitting in a room doing it. It's bringing all of those voices in, because we never know, SLT will have one perception of what's going on, teacher will have another, children another. Bringing those together is really important to understand what are the actual challenges, what's really going on, not just what we perceive is going on.
Yes, I'm a great admirer of Kulvarn's work, because it's thinking the school for anyone who's not seen his book or his podcasts or his tweets. Sometimes gets a bit of a knock from people on social media, but I always say when I do events, social media doesn't run your school, you do.
So for the last question, I'm really interested to hear your perspective on what you feel the key steps leadership in schools can take towards a whole school approach to mental health and well-being. Because I'm sure you know this, you can't, it needs to be done as a unity. It can't be one particular person trying to do it all. We need to work together if we want to achieve a goal. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, you absolutely need everyone working together, Laiba. You're quite right there. And one thing I'm often asked is, particularly on the mental health board, how do we do this really effectively? And the answer is, get yourself a team to do it. The schools that do the very best on there actually have a whole team of people behind them. So you've got, maybe it's something led by a deputy head or assistant head, but they will include in their supportive group aspects right across the school. So leaders, class teachers, midday supervisors. Let's never forget that. Lowest paid, but in many ways, the most valuable resource in terms of safeguarding, because they have a different level of trust with the children, because obviously many of them are from the community themselves, which teachers aren't always. Site management staff as well, but also include, and one of the very best schools, Judge Dominic Award, included cynical people as well, people who didn't get it. But what they did was they were able to win them over by recognising your it's valid, but this is why I'm doing this. And these people are actually quite influential. And you often hear this when you hear talk about toxic environments in schools. Some of the people who are influential are others. They were able to go away and say to other more cynical but quieter people, this is why they're doing it. It's going to benefit the children in this way. It's going to benefit us in this way. And so that's a really strong thing to do. So again, it goes back to embracing your team and building that team spirit in that way, because again, I often hear from teachers, we're too busy. We're too busy teaching. We're too busy assessing. Why should we worry about mental health?
Yeah.
Again, it's back to the communication, the sense of moral purpose, your sense of why. And again, knowing your why is sometimes not, but actually it's something that is used across business. Why are we doing? What are we doing? And obviously in schools, we are doing it because we've got a social and economic as well as a moral purpose there. The communication of why is incredibly important.
Oh, well, Andrew, thank you so much. We've come to the end of the podcast today. We're really grateful for your time. It's been brilliant to hear your insights and your experience. We always end on our Sharing is Caring, where we ask our guest if they have anything they would like to recommend our listeners to engage with. That might be a podcast or a film or a book, whatever it is. What would you like to recommend?
Well, I've got 3, if I may. I've got a book, I've got a television program, and a film.
Okay.
It's a little bit about going some good old sandwich approach, which you often hear feedback. So the book I'd always recommend is what's called Legacy by James Kerr, and this is cover. It's about the All Blacks rugby team, which is then written about the culture within the team, and what was being worked on at an uncharacteristically challenging time for the team and what leaders could do like. If you think about New Zealand as a nation of just over 5 million people, so it's actually one of the smaller rugby nations. How come there's won more World Cups than anyone else? It's equal with South Africa, but South Africa is a much bigger nation, more players. So how come that's like I said, it's about re-buying in to the culture. So it's actually not so much about rugby, it's about cultures. Two things from the book strike me. There's one is, first chapter is called Sweeping the Sheds, and the sheds are the changing rooms. And it's not left to the apprentices to brush up the mud and the bits of discarded kit and bandages. It's done by the leaders, the management. They do it. And then they send a very strong message that we are not any more important than anyone else. We can do these jobs that might be seen as menial. And another thing is a player who was awarded his debut. It's a green shirt straight on. Just held it, caressed it in his hands, and held it to his face, and he inhaled it. And he was asked, why are you doing that? He said, it's my jersey for the moment, but I'm the custodian of the jersey, and it's up to me to pass it on in a better state when I'm finished. And that is so applicable to schools. We need to pass them on in better states, because schools by nature, the staff will move on under hopefully a longer period rather than a shorter period, but it will be passed on.
That's a good way to end. Thank you, Andrew. That's brilliant. So thank you so much again for your time, Andrew. Thank you also, Laiba, as always. We would love for you to follow us on your podcast platform, and if you feel able to give us a rating and review, that would be wonderful. It means more people will find out about the podcast, and we think these are conversations educators need to hear.
Don't forget to drop us an email if you have any thoughts, comments or questions, or want to share some brilliant work that you are doing for wellbeing in your setting. Email teamwellbeing@twinkle.co.uk with your thoughts.
Thank you and goodbye.